throat.
Oh, sit there and eat biscuits.
Mm.
All right.
Hopefully it's not so
Hello.
loud.
No, I know. I was just like, oh, I want a biscuit, but I can't eat and talk on the camera at the same time. Hello. Thanks, everybody, for showing up on time when I was late. That's how I do. I'm glad to have you guys here. Let's see. What are we doing today? Yeah, Carolyn and I both almost forgot that this was happening because it feels like a Saturday. Because we both have the day off.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope you guys are all having good days. Michelle says she's using her day off to clean. Always an admirable use of a day off.
Yes.
I haven't done much of anything. I'll tell you what. I woke up late, sat out on the balcony to drink my coffee and eat my breakfast and read some short stories by Dorothy Sayers, which were delightful. Although at least some of her short story mysteries are definitely like, I feel like that doesn't work.
Oh,
it's hard to do a really satisfying mystery in short story form.
Yeah.
I mean, like some of them are like, oh yeah, that concept could have worked for a novel. You just would have had less coincidences to make things last longer. Like there's one where it's just a bunch of people in a bar, and like everybody in the bar ends up having a little piece of information that can contribute to the mystery. That's like, yeah, you could have done that one as a book, and it just you would have had to like do more finding the people who had the information instead of them all conveniently being in a bar.
Right.
There's at least one where I'm like, but that doesn't explain that. No.
Right. Yeah.
There's one where it's like, aha, you think this is happening, but then twist at the end. I'm like, but now the main character's behavior doesn't make sense,
right?
In light of the twist, Dorothy, you didn't think that one through.
Yeah.
Well, like we're supposed to feel bad for this guy, but I feel like he brought it on himself. He spent the whole short story acting as if he was one thing, and then he was actually something else. So, like, if you're gonna do that, sometimes people are gonna misinterpret your behavior.
Yeah.
You can get in trouble. Anyway, they're fun stories. Several of them are Lord Peter Wimsey stories, and several of them were another detective she wrote that I had never heard of named Montague Egg. Delightful character.
Yes.
Very much.
He does not sell eggs, as his name might suggest.
No, he's a commercial traveler. And he sells wine and spirits. Only one of the stories, at least in this collection, had anything to do with wine. Most of them just have to do with him traveling around. Anyway, it's kind of fun because it's like all his cleverness is just born of him being a very observant person who's traveled a lot, met lots of people, and also, has learned to observe people and kind of read people's behavior by virtue of being a salesman, rather than Lord Peter, where all of his cleverness is predominantly from not entirely unaffected by his wealth and consequence.
Yeah.
His privilege.
Yes.
Anywho, I almost decided what I'm going to read today. Which is to say, I think I'm going to do Forbidden Brides. That one's fun. But I wanted to pick a short one to start with, because that one will probably only take like 30 minutes or so. So I thought I could start with another short one. I'm running out of the short, but I've used a lot of them. Let's see.
You could do one medium one, if such exists.
Let's see. Oh, that one's pretty good. Okay, yeah, let's do that, I think. Diseasemaker's Croup. It's a very weird short one. Should be fun. Okay. All right. Oh, Michelle said she found a copy of Trigger Warning. I actually have not read that one yet. Just had not gotten around to it. All right. Diseasemaker's Croup. An affliction, morbid in its intensity, unfortunate in its scope, afflicting those who habitually and pathologically catalog and construct diseases. Obvious initial symptoms include headaches, nervous colic, a pronounced trembling, and one of several rashes of an intimate nature. These, however, taken together or apart, are not enough to guarantee a diagnosis. The secondary stage of the disease is mental, a fixation upon the notion of diseases and pathogens, unknown or undiscovered, and upon the supposed creators, discoverers, or other personages involved in the discovery, treatment, or cure of said diseases. Whatever the circumstances may be, once and for all, the author would warn against any trust being placed in these specious advertisements in appearing, the eyes projecting the usual way, that the administration of small injections of beef tea or meat broth will assist in maintaining strength. At these stages, the disease may be treatable. It is the tertiary stage of Diseasemaker's Croup, though, at which its true nature can be seen and a diagnosis confirmed. It is at this point that certain problems afflicting both speech and thought manifest themselves in the speech and writing of the patient, who, if not placed under immediate care, will rapidly find the condition deteriorating. It has been remarked that the invasion of sleep and a boiling 2 ounces of the point of suffocation, the face becomes swollen and livid, the throat is a hereditary tendency, and the tongue assumes the natural characteristics of the lungs supervene. The emotions liable to be excited by whatever recalls forcibly to the disease in question, which are so perseveringly and disgustingly paraded before the public eye by quacks. Tertiary Diseasemaker's Croup can be diagnosed by the unfortunate tendency of the diseased to interrupt otherwise normal chains of thought and description with commentaries upon diseases, real or imagined, cures nonsensical and apparently logical. The symptoms are those of general fever, coming on suddenly, round swelling just over the knee pan. When quite chronic, and finally, perhaps vomiting, offensive fogs. Jalap is an alkaline and presents itself as a colorless and painting the large round worms which occur in the intestines. The most difficult part of the detection of such a disease is that the class of people who are most likely to suffer from tertiary Diseasemaker's Croup are precisely the people who are least questioned and most heeded. Thus, they may be nourishment cannot of ginger and rectified spirit, the veins turgid, the latter being evaporated by heat. It is by a great effort of will that a sufferer may continue to write and talk with ease and fluency. Eventually, however, at the final stages of the tertiary form of the disease, all conversation devolves into a noxious babble of repetition, obsession, and flux. Whilst the explosive cough is going on, the veins turgid, the eyes projecting, the whole frame is so shaken that the invasion of epidemic has been preceded by dense, dark, and if this is not gratified, melancholy, loss of appetite, perhaps vomiting, heat, and the tongue assumes the natural characteristics of the bruised root. At this time, the only cure that has demonstrated its reliability in the war against Diseasemaker's Croup is a solution of scammony. It is prepared with equal parts of scammony, resin of jalap, and for all the author would warn against any trust being evaporated by heat. Scammony is one widely distributed, though not always actively developed. The face becomes swollen and livid, the throat is more inflamed, and may be, once and for all, the author would warn against any trust being placed in the intestines. Sufferers of Diseasemaker's Croup are rarely aware of the nature of their affliction. Indeed, the descent into a netherworld of pseudo-medical nonsense is one that cannot fail to excite the pity and sympathy of any onlooker, nor do the frequent bursts of sense amidst the nonsense do more than force the medical man to harden his heart and to declare once and for all his opposition to such practices as the invention and creation of imaginary diseases, which have no place in this modern world. When bleeding from leech bites continues longer than is required by the system, they are seized with a boiling 2 ounces of sleep and a boiling 2 ounces of the specious advertisements in question, which are so perseveringly and disgustingly paraded before the public eye by quacks. Scammony is liable to be excited by heat. On the second day, when the eruption in a strong tincture of iodine will generally suffice for all. This is not madness. This is such pain. The face becomes swollen and livid, dark, and consisting of bicarbonate of potash, sesquicarbonate of ammonia, and rectified spirit. The expulsive cough is going on, the habitual consumption of a larger quantity of food than is thought necessary. When the mind, whilst the beloved scenes, they may also become enlarged. Yeah, very weird one.
Very weird.
Difficult, definitely a difficult task to write a story in which the narrator is losing their mind as you go.
Yeah.
While also making it clear what is happening to the reader.
Right, yeah.
You have to give enough sense that people actually can follow it.
Right.
Anyway. That one is especially good when he reads it because he really has it in his head exactly how the narrative goes.
Right.
I'm sure he had time also to kind of practice his delivery and get it like really good. Anyway, all right. Now we shall move on to our main chunk of reading for today, which is a story called Forbidden Brides of the Faceless Slaves in the Secret House of the Night of Dread Desire.
Wow.
Just lean into it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to do a little water before I start. Okay. Here we go. 1. Somewhere in the night, someone was writing. 2. Her feet scrunched the gravel as she ran, wildly, up the tree-lined drive. Her heart was pounding in her chest. Her lungs felt as if they were bursting, heaving breath after breath of the cold night air. Her eyes fixed on the house ahead, the single light in the topmost room drawing her toward it like a moth to a candle flame. Above her, and away in the deep forest behind the house, night things whooped and squawked. From the road behind her, she heard something scream briefly, a small animal that had been the victim of some beast of prey, she hoped, but could not be certain. She ran that the legions of hell were close on her heels, and spared not even a glance behind her until she reached the porch of the old mansion. In the moon's pale light, the white pillars seemed skeletal, like the bones of a great beast. She clung to the wooden doorframe, gulping air, staring back down the long driveway, as if she were waiting for something, and then she rapped on the door. Timorously at first, and then harder. The rapping echoed through the house. She imagined from the echo that came back to her that, far away, someone was knocking on another door, muffled and dead. "Please," she called, "if there's someone there, anyone, please let me in. I beseech you. I implore you." Her voice sounded strange to her ears. The flickering light in the topmost room faded and vanished, to reappear in successive descending windows. One person, then, with a candle. The light vanished into the depths of the house. She tried to catch her breath. It seemed like an age passed before she heard footsteps on the other side of the door and spied a chink of candlelight through a crack in the ill-fitting doorframe. "Hello?" she said. The voice, when it spoke, was dry as old bones, a desiccated voice redolent of cracking parchment and musty grave hangings. "Who calls?" it said. "Who knocks? Who calls on this night of all nights?" The voice gave her no comfort. She looked out at the night that enveloped the house, then pulled herself straight, tossed her raven locks, and said in a voice that, she hoped, betrayed no fear, "'Tis I, Amelia Earnshaw, recently orphaned and now on my way to take up a position as a governess to the 2 small children, a boy and a girl, of Lord Falconmere, whose cruel glances I found, during our interview in his London residence, both repellent and fascinating, but whose aquiline face haunts my dreams." "And what do you do here, then, at this house on this night of all nights? Falconmere Castle lies a good 20 leagues on from here, on the other side of the moors." The coachman, an ill-natured fellow and a mute, or so he pretended to be, for he formed no words, but made his wishes known only by grunts and gobblings, reined in his team a mile or so back down the road, or so I would judge, and then he showed me by gestures that he would go no further, and that I was to alight. When I did refuse to do so, he pushed me roughly from the carriage to the cold earth. Then, whipping the poor horses into a frenzy, he clattered off the way he had come, taking my several bags and my trunk with him. I called after him, but he did not return, and it seemed to me that a deeper darkness stirred in the forest gloom behind me. I saw the light in your window, and I... She was able to keep up her pretense of bravery no longer, and she began to sob. Your father, came the voice from the other side of the door. Would he have been the Honourable Hubert Earnshaw? Amelia choked back her tears. Yes, he was. And you say you are an orphan? She thought of her father, of his tweed jacket, and the maelstrom that seized him and whipped him onto the rocks and away from her forever. He died trying to save my mother's life. They both were drowned. She heard the dull clunking of a key being turned in a lock, then twin booms as iron bolts were drawn back. Welcome then, Miss Amelia Earnshaw. Welcome to your inheritance in this house without a name. I welcome on this night of all nights. The door opened. The man held a black tallow candle, its flickering flame illuminating his face from below, giving it an unearthly and eldritch appearance. He could have been a jack-o'-lantern, she thought, or a particularly elderly axe murderer. He gestured for her to come in. Why do you keep saying that? She asked. Why do I keep saying what? On this night of all nights. You've said it 3 times so far. He simply stared at her for a moment. Then he beckoned again with one bone-colored finger. As she entered, he thrust the candle close to her face and stared at her with eyes that were not truly mad, but were still far from sane. He seemed to be examining her, and eventually he grunted and nodded. This way, was all he said. She followed him down a long corridor. The candle flame threw fantastic shadows about the two of them, and in its light the grandfather clock and the spindly chairs and the table danced and capered. The old man fumbled with his keychain and unlocked a door in the wall beneath the stairs. A smell came from the darkness beyond, of must and dust and abandonment. Where are we going? She asked. He nodded as if he had not understood her. Then he said, There are some as are what they are, and there are some as aren't what they seem to be, and there are some as only seem to be what they seem to be. Mark my words and mark them well, Hubert Earnshaw's daughter. Do you understand me? She shook her head. He began to walk and did not look back. She followed the old man down the stairs. 3. Far away and far along, the young man slammed his quill down upon the manuscript, spattering sepia ink across the ream of paper and the polished table. It's no good, he said despondently. He dabbed at a circle of ink he had just made on the table with a delicate forefinger, smearing the teak a darker brown. Then, unthinking, he rubbed the finger against the bridge of his nose. It left a dark smudge. No, sir. The butler had entered almost soundlessly. It's happening again, Toombs. Humor creeps in. Self-parody whispers at the edges of things. And I find myself guying literary convention and sending up both myself and the whole scrivening profession. The butler gazed unblinking at his young master. I believe humor is very highly thought of in certain circles, sir. The young man rested his head in his hands, rubbing his forefinger pensively with his fingertips. That's not the point, Toombs. I'm trying to create a slice of life here, an accurate representation of the world as it is, and of the human condition. Instead, I find myself indulging, as I write, in schoolboy parody of the foibles of my fellows. I make little jokes. He smeared ink all over his face. Very little. From the forbidden room at the top of the house, an eerie, ululating cry rang out, echoing through the house. The young man sighed. You had better feed Aunt Agatha, Toombs. Very good, sir. The young man picked up the quill pen and idly scratched his ear with the tip. Behind him, in a bad light, hung the portrait of his great-great-grandfather. The painted eyes had been cut out most carefully long ago, and now real eyes stared out of the canvas face, looking down at the writer. The eyes glinted a tawny gold. If the young man had turned around and remarked upon them, he might have thought them the golden eyes of some great cat, or of some misshapen bird of prey, were such a thing possible. These were not eyes that belonged in any human head. But the young man did not turn. Instead, oblivious, he reached for a new sheet of paper, dipped his quill into the glass inkwell, and commenced to write. 4. Aye, said the old man, putting down the black tallow candle on the silent harmonium. He is our master, and we are his slaves, though we pretend to ourselves that it is not so. And when the time is right, then he demands what he craves, and it is our duty and our compulsion to provide him with... He shuddered and drew a breath. Then he said only, with what he needs. The bat-wing curtains shook and fluttered in the glassless casement as the storm drew closer. Amelia clutched the lace handkerchief to her breast, her father's monogram upward. And the gate? She asked in a whisper. It was locked in your ancestor's time, and he charged before he vanished that it should always remain so. But there are still tunnels, folk do say, that link the old crypt with the burial grounds. And Sir Frederick's first wife? He shook his head sadly. Hopelessly insane, and but a mediocre harpsichord player. He put it about that she was dead, and perhaps some believed him. She repeated his last 4 words to herself. Then she looked up at him, a new resolve in her eyes. And for myself? Now I have learned why I am here. What do you advise me to do? He peered around the empty hall. Then he said urgently, Fly from here, Miss Earnshaw. Fly while there is still time. Fly for your life. Fly for your immortal... My what? She asked. But even as the words escaped her crimson lips, the old man crumpled to the floor. A silver crossbow quarrel protruded from the back of his head. He is dead? She said in shocked wonderment. Aye, affirmed a cruel voice from the far end of the hall. And he was dead before this day, girl. And I do think he has been dead a monstrous long time. Under her shocked gaze, the body began to putresce. The flesh dripped and rotted and liquefied. The bones revealed, crumbled, and oozed, until there was nothing but a stinking mass of fetor where once there had been a man. Amelia squatted beside it, then dipped her fingertip into the noxious stuff. She licked her finger and then made a face. You would appear to be right, sir, whoever you are, she said. I would estimate that he has been dead for the better part of 100 years. 5. I am endeavoring, said the young man to the chambermaid, to write a novel that reflects life as it is, mirrors it down to the finest degree. Yet as I write, it turns to dross and gross mockery. What should I do, Ethel? What should I do? Yes, Michelle, agreed. Ew. I'm sure I don't know, sir, said the chambermaid, who was pretty and young, and had come to the great house in mysterious circumstances several weeks earlier. She gave the bellows several more squeezes, making the heart of the fire glow an orange-white. Would that be all? Yes, he said. You may go, Ethel. The girl picked up the now empty coal scuttle and walked at a steady pace across the drawing room. The young man made no move to return to his writing desk. Instead, he stood in thought by the fireplace, staring at the human skull on the mantel, at the twin crossed swords that hung above it upon the wall. The fire crackled and spat as a lump of coal broke in half. Footsteps close behind him. The young man turned. You? The man facing him was almost his double. The white streak in the auburn hair proclaimed them of the same blood, if any proof were needed. The stranger's eyes were dark and wild. his mouth petulant yet oddly firm. "Yes, I, your elder brother, whom you thought dead these many years, but I am not dead, or perhaps I am no longer dead, and I have come back. I come back from ways that are best left untraveled to claim what is truly mine." The young man's eyebrows raised. "I see. Well, obviously all this is yours, if you can prove that you are who you say you are." "Proof? I need no proof. I claim birthright and blood rights and death right." So saying, he pulled both of the swords down from above the fireplace and passed one hilt first to his younger brother. "Now guard you, my brother, and may the best man win." Steel flashed in the firelight and clashed and kissed again in an intricate dance of thrust and parry. At times it seemed no more than a dainty minuet or a courtly and deliberate ritual, while at other times it seemed pure savagery, a wildness that moved faster than the eye could easily follow. Around and around the room they went, and up the steps to the mezzanine and down the steps to the main hall. They swung from drapes and from chandeliers. They leapt up on tables and down again. The older brother obviously was more experienced and perhaps was a better swordsman, but the younger man was fresher, and he fought like a man possessed, forcing his opponent back and back and back to the roaring fire itself. The older brother reached out with his left hand and grasped the poker. He swung it wildly at the younger, who ducked, and in one elegant motion ran his brother through. "I am done for. I am a dead man." The younger brother nodded his ink-stained face. "Perhaps it is better this way. Truly, I did not want the house or the lands. All I wanted, I think, was peace." He lay there, bleeding crimson onto the gray flagstone. "Brother, take my hand." The young man knelt and clasped a hand that already, it seemed to him, was becoming cold. "Before I go into that night where none can follow, there are things I must tell you. Firstly, with my death, I truly believe the curse is lifted from our line. The second," his breath now came in a bubbling wheeze and he was having difficulty speaking. "The second is the thing in the abyss. Beware, the cellars, the rats, it follows." And with this, his head lolled on the stone and his eyes rolled back and saw nothing ever again. Nope, it's that. It's coming from that direction. It's bound to happen.
Yep.
I forgot to tweak the blinds this time. All right, there we go. And outside the house, a raven cawed thrice. Inside, strange music had begun to skirl up from the crypt, signifying that for some, the wake had already started. The younger brother, once more, he hoped, the rightful possessor of his title, picked up a bell and rang for a servant. Toombs the butler was there in the doorway before the last ring had died away. "Remove this," said the young man, "but treat it well. He died to redeem himself, perhaps to redeem us both." Toombs said nothing, merely nodded to show that he had understood. The young man walked out of the drawing room. He entered the Hall of Mirrors, a hall from which all the mirrors had carefully been removed, leaving irregularly shaped patches on the paneled walls, and believing himself alone, he began to muse aloud. "This is precisely what I was talking about," he said. "Had such a thing happened in one of my tales, and such things happen all the time, I would have felt myself constrained to guy it unmercifully." He slammed a fist against a wall where once a hexagonal mirror had hung. "What is wrong with me? Wherefore this flaw?" Strange. I just realized in the audiobook, it sounds like he says, "Wherefore this floor?"
Oh.
And I was always like, I mean, it's kind of a weird, it's there's a lot of weird language in the story. So it's like,
Yeah.
"Wherefore this floor?" I was like, is that a reference? Is that a line from Shakespeare or something?
Yeah.
"What is wrong with me? Wherefore this floor?" And I'm looking at it going, "Oh, wherefore this flaw?" Flaw. That makes sense
It's
now.
just the way he pronounced it.
Yeah. "Wherefore this floor?" English people sometimes can't even tell what they're saying. It's like, speak English. All right. Strange scuttling things gibbered and cheatled in the black drapes at the end of the room, and high in the gloomy oak beams and behind the wainscoting, but they made no answer. He had expected none. He walked up the grand staircase and along a darkened hall to enter his study. Someone, he suspected, had been tampering with his papers. He suspected that he would find out who later this evening, after the gathering. He sat down at his desk, dipped his quill pen once more, and continued to write. 6. Outside the room, the ghoul lords howled in frustration and hunger, and they threw themselves against the door in their ravenous fury, but the locks were stout, and Amelia had every hope that they would hold. What had the woodcutter said to her? His words came back to her then in her time of need, as if he were standing close to her, his manly frame mere inches from her feminine curves, the very scent of his honest, laboring body surrounding her like the headiest perfume. And she heard his words as if he were, at that moment, whispering them in her ear. I was not always in the state ye see me in now, lassie, he had told her. Once I had another name, and a destiny unconnected to the hewing of cords of firewood from fallen trees. But know you this, in the escritoire there is a secret compartment, or so my great-uncle claimed when he was in his cups. The escritoire, of course! She rushed to the old writing desk. At first she could find no trace of a secret compartment. She pulled out the drawers one after another, and then perceived that one of them was much shorter than the rest, which seeing, she forced her white hand into the space where formerly the drawer had been, and found at the back a button. Frantically she pressed it. Something opened, and she put her hand on a tightly rolled paper scroll. Amelia withdrew her hand. The scroll was tied with a dusty black ribbon, and with fumbling fingers she untied the knot, and opened the paper. Then she read, trying to make sense of the antiquated handwriting, of the ancient words. As she did so, a ghastly pallor suffused her handsome face, and even her violet eyes seemed clouded and distracted. The knockings and scratchings redoubled. In but a short time they would burst through, she had no doubt. No door could hold them forever. They would burst through, and she would be their prey, unless... Stop, she called, her voice trembling. I abjure you, every one of you, and thee most of all, O Prince of Carrion, in the name of the ancient compact between thy people and mine. The sound stopped. It seemed to the girl that there was shock in that silence. Finally, a cracked voice said, The compact. And a dozen voices, as ghastly again, whispered, The compact, in a susurrus of unearthly sound. Aye, called Amelia Earnshaw, her voice no longer unsteady, the compact. For the scroll, the long hidden scroll, had been the compact, the dread agreement between the lords of the house and the denizens of the crypt in ages past. It had described and enumerated the nightmarish rituals that had chained them one to another over the centuries, rituals of blood and of salt and more. If you have read the compact, said the deep voice from beyond the door, then you know what we need, Hubert Earnshaw's daughter. Brides, she said simply. The brides, came the whisper from beyond the door, and it redoubled and resounded until it seemed to her that the very house itself throbbed and echoed to the beat of those words. 2 syllables invested with longing and with love and with hunger. Amelia bit her lip. Aye, the brides. I will bring thee brides. I shall bring brides for all. She spoke quietly, but they heard her, for there was only silence, a deep and velvet silence, on the other side of the door. And then one ghoul voice hissed, Yes. And do you think we could get her to throw in a side order of those little bread roll things? 7. Yes, you may all take a laughing break. That's the point where he truly tips his hat.
Yes.
His hand.
Yes.
His hat. Totally different. 7. Hot tears stung the young man's eyes. He pushed the papers from him and flung the quilled pen across the room. It spattered its inky load over the bust of his great-great-great-grandfather, the brown ink soiling the patient white marble. The occupant of the bust, a large and mournful raven, startled, nearly fell off, and only kept its place by dint of flapping its wings several times. It turned then in an awkward step and hop to stare with one black bead eye at the young man. "Oh, this is intolerable," exclaimed the young man. He was pale and trembling. "I cannot do it, and I shall never do it. I swear now by—" And he hesitated, casting his mind around for a suitable curse from the extensive family archives. The raven looked unimpressed. "Before you go cursing and start dragging peacefully dead and respectable ancestors back from their well-earned graves, just answer me one question." The voice of the bird was like stone striking against stone, which I don't know how to make that sound. So I'm just giving the bird a voice that I want to do. The young man said nothing at first. It is not unknown for ravens to talk, but this one had not done so before, and he had not been expecting it to. "Certainly, ask your question." The raven tipped its head to one side. "Do you like writing that stuff?" "Like?" "That life as it is stuff you do. I've looked over your shoulder sometimes. I've even read a little here and there. Do you enjoy writing it?" The young man looked down at the bird. "It's literature," he explained, as if to a child. "Real literature. Real life. The real world. It's an artist's job to show people the world they live in. We hold up mirrors." Outside the room, lightning clove the sky. The young man glanced out of the window. A jagged streak of blinding fire created warped and ominous silhouettes from the bony trees and the ruined abbey on the hill. The raven cleared its throat. "I said, do you enjoy it?" The young man looked at the bird, then he looked away, and wordlessly, he shook his head. "That's why you keep trying to pull it apart," said the bird. "It's not the satirist in you that makes you lampoon the commonplace and the humdrum. Merely boredom with the way things are. Do you see?" It paused to preen a stray wing feather back into place with its beak. Then it looked up at him once more. "Have you ever thought of writing fantasy?" it asked. The young man laughed. "Fantasy? Listen, I write literature. Fantasy isn't life. It's esoteric dreams written by a minority for a minority. It's what you'd be writing if you knew what was good for you." "I'm a classicist," said the young man. He reached out his hand to a shelf of the classics. Udolpho, the Castle of Otranto, the Saragossa manuscript, the Monk, and the rest of them. "It's literature." "Nevermore," said the raven. It was the last word the young man ever heard it speak. It hopped from the bust, spread its wings, and glided out at the study door into the awaiting darkness. The young man shivered. He rolled the stock themes of fantasy over in his mind. Cars and stockbrokers and commuters, housewives and police, agony columns and commercials for soap, income tax and cheap restaurants, magazines and credit cards and streetlights and computers. "It is escapism, true," he said aloud, "but is not the highest impulse in mankind the urge towards freedom, the drive to escape?" The young man returned to his desk, and he gathered together the pages of his unfinished novel and dropped them unceremoniously in the bottom drawer amongst the yellowing maps and cryptic testaments and the documents signed in blood. The dust, disturbed, made him cough. He took up a fresh quill, sliced at its tip with his penknife. In 5 deft strokes and cuts, he had a pen. He dipped the tip of it into the glass inkwell. Once more, he began to write. 8. Amelia Earnshaw placed the slices of whole wheat bread into the toaster and pushed it down. She set the timer to dark brown just as George liked it. Amelia preferred her toast barely singed. She liked white bread as well, even if it didn't have the vitamins. She hadn't eaten white bread for a decade now. I almost said vitamins, because that's how Neil says it in the audiobook, and I find that one of the more adorable British pronunciations. Vitamins.
Like McVitie's.
That's why they're called McVitie's? Because it's got vitamins in it?
I assume so, yeah. Because they're digestives.
We have McVitie's. That wasn't just a random reference. We actually have them right here.
Although there's never a reason not to mention.
That's very true.
Yes.
If you've never had McVitie's, well, I recommend the chocolate ones. Just the plain ones are a bit boring. At the breakfast table, George read his paper. He did not look up. He never looked up. I hate him, she thought, and simply putting the emotion into words surprised her. She said it again in her head. I hate him. It was like a song. I hate him for his toast, and for his bald head, and for the way he chases the office crumpet, girls barely out of school who laugh at him behind his back, and for the way he ignores me whenever he doesn't want to be bothered with me, and for the way he says, "What, love?" when I ask him a simple question, as if he's long ago forgotten my name, as if he's forgotten that I even have a name. Scrambled or boiled, she said aloud. What, love? George Earnshaw regarded his wife with fond affection and would have found her hatred of him astonishing. He thought of her in the same way and with the same emotions that he thought of anything which had been in the house for 10 years and still worked well. The television, for example, or the lawnmower. He thought it was love. You know, we ought to go on one of those marches, he said, tapping the newspaper's editorial. Show we're committed. Eh, love? The toaster made a noise to show that it was done. Only one dark brown slice had popped up. She took a knife and fished out the torn second slice with it. The toaster had been a wedding present from her Uncle John. Soon she'd have to buy another, or start cooking toast under the grill the way her mother had done. George, do you want your eggs scrambled or boiled? She asked very quietly, and there was something in her voice that made him look up. Any way you like it, love, he said amiably, and could not for the life of him, as he told everyone in the office later that morning, understand why she had simply stood there holding her slice of toast, or why she had started to cry. 9. The quill pen went scritch, scritch across the paper, and the young man was engrossed in what he was doing. His face was strangely content, and a smile flickered between his eyes and his lips. He was rapt. Things scratched and scuttled in the wainscot, but he hardly heard them. High in her attic room, Aunt Agatha howled and yowled and rattled her chains. A weird cachinnation came from the ruined abbey. It rent the night air, ascending into a peal of manic glee. In the dark woods beyond the great house, shapeless figures shuffled and loped, and raven-locked young women fled from them in fear. Swear, said Toombs the butler, down in the butler's pantry, to the brave girl who was passing herself off as chambermaid. Swear to me, Ethel, on your life, that you'll never reveal a word of what I tell you to a living soul. There were faces at the windows and words written in blood. Deep in the crypt, a lonely ghoul crunched on something that might once have been alive. Forked lightning slashed the ebony night. The faceless were walking. All was right with the world. I love that one.
Yes.
I feel like he had something very interesting. It's not all of them. The stories not all the stories in the introduction. Or sometimes they're just like fun fact, and sometimes they give like an interesting view of the experience of writing the story or the reason he wrote it. I'm going to read this one for Forbidden Brides.
I'm assuming it has something to do with Brontes, given the Earnshaws and the aunt in the attic.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm sure that was part of it for sure. I don't remember if he mentioned them by name. I started writing this story in pencil one windy winter's night in the waiting room between platforms 5 and 6 of East Croydon Railway Station, which is my favorite thing that I've ever heard him write. It's just that sentence related to this story, because there are people who think that like Neil Gaiman writes all of his books with a quill pen in sepia ink in a dark and mysterious tower during a lightning storm or some shit.
Gotcha.
There's a famous, well, not famous, famous to me, I guess. One time he tweeted saying, like, oh, dang it, I forgot to charge my laptop before getting on this plane, and now I can't write. And I needed to get writing done on this plane ride. Now I can't.
Yeah.
And he received roughly 1 million replies saying, well, you should be writing with a pen, not an ink pen, and a Moleskine notebook. You know,
Yeah.
because you know, Neil Gaiman.
Right.
And he responded like, yes, this story was originally written with a fountain pen in a Moleskine notebook, but now I must transpose it into a laptop so I can email it to an editor.
Right.
Because we live in the future.
Because gotta get paid.
Yeah. Because like that, yes, I do frequently write with fountain pens in notebooks on paper. I like it. But, you know, even when you do that for your first draft, it must go into the computer at some point.
Yeah.
Anyway, when it was done, I was 22 going on 23. When it was done, I typed it up and showed it to a couple editors I knew. One sniffed, told me it wasn't his kind of thing, and he didn't honestly think it was actually anybody's kind of thing, while the other read it, looked sympathetic, and gave it back, explaining the reason it would never be printed was that it was facetious nonsense. I put it away, glad to have been saved the public embarrassment of having more people read it and dislike it. The story stayed unread, wandering from folder to box to tub, from office to basement to attic, for another 20 years, and when I thought of it, it was only with relief that it had not been printed. One day, I was asked for a story for an anthology called Gothic! And I remembered the manuscript in the attic and went up to find it to see if there was anything in it that I could rescue. I started reading Forbidden Brides, and as I read it, I smiled. Actually, I decided it was pretty funny, and it was smart, too. A good little story. The clumsinesses were mostly the sort of things you'd find in journeyman work, and all of them seemed easily fixable. I got out the computer and did another draft of the story 20 years after the first. Shortened the title to its present form. Shortened the title to its present form.
Yeah.
It doesn't say what the original title was. That's the worst part of this.
Yeah.
Shortened the title to its present form and sent it off to the editor. At least one reviewer felt it was facetious nonsense, but that seemed to be a minority opinion, as Forbidden Brides was picked up by several Best of the Year anthologies and was voted Best Short Story in the 2005 Locus Awards. I'm not sure what we can learn from that. Sometimes you just show stories to the wrong people and nobody's going to like everything. From time to time, I wonder what else there is in the boxes in the attic. I love that he kind of wrote it. I feel like I think in the Evening with Neil and Amanda live show recording, I think he reads this one and he mentions that it was like, it was basically like a collaboration with his younger self.
Yeah.
Took this thing his younger self had written and goes, okay, I can see the things that need to be fixed now.
Yeah.
Anyway, maybe I might be misremembering where I heard that from, or even what story he was talking about, but I think it was that one. Did
you get to see them when they were?
No.
Last time they were in town, I forget when it was, but it was. I remember I couldn't go, and I was very disappointed.
Yeah. To be honest, I am not a big Amanda Palmer fan. I have mixed feelings, but
that's fair.
Sorry, Michelle. I know you love her, but
I mean, they're very different types of artists. So I mean,
yes,
there's no. It's not like their acts naturally go together.
Also, the cost was somewhat prohibitive.
Yeah.
At least remember when they did the Evening with Neil and Amanda thing. I was like, that was probably fun. Yeah. Michelle said the show was amazing. Yeah, like I thought the show would probably be really fun, but it was a combination of I'm predominantly interested in half of it, and I just did not have the money at the time to go. Yeah. So
that was the main thing stopping me as well.
Yeah.
Wasn't it up more?
I think so. That sounds right. I did get the soundtrack or the recording rather after the fact and listen to it.
Nice.
So yeah, you can listen to it pretty much the whole thing, I think.
Okay.
So yeah, I can send it to you if you are interested in hearing it.
Yeah.
It's especially delightful because that was where I first heard his story, Shoggoth's Old Peculiar. I'm trying to look up what is exactly on it. Yeah, she does some songs, he reads some stories. Because
That's what they do.
iTunes is dumb. It's listing each person's. It's listing it by artist, as if I own several different albums, distinct albums called An Evening with Neil and Amanda by different artists. One of the albums is by Amanda Palmer. One of them is by Amanda Palmer and Jason Webley. One of the other ones is by
Neil
Gaiman. That. It's like, okay, if I sort it by album, now there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do a little like Ask Neil and Amanda section, and they do some stories, some songs. Jonathan Colton joins them does a song with Neil. I'm trying to remember if there's anything particularly good on it that I just like would say, you should definitely check it out for this particular reason. I mean, I really enjoy his, he reads The Day the Saucers Came, The Man Who Forgot Ray Bradbury. That's weird. I could have sworn this was the one on which you read Sugar Soul Peculiar, but it's not coming up. Oh no, that's okay. So apparently I also own an album called A Prelude to an Evening with Neil and Amanda, which has like some other stuff. Oh yes. This also contains Forbidden Brides of the Faceless Slaves. So it must have been on this that I'm remembering him doing.
Oh, okay.
Telling that part of the story, that it was like a collaboration with his younger self.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah, it's got so much content that I'm like, it doesn't seem, you know what? This must be like extra stuff from different shows, because they did like a whole tour.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's like, there's more in this than would make sense to be in, because that show cannot have been that long. And this contains Sugar Soul Peculiar is like 25 minutes. Forbidden Brides is like 34 minutes. And then there's a bunch of other stuff. So it's like, that would be a very long show. Anyway.
Yeah. They might have
maybe it was, those were like outtakes or something. Oh, Michelle, that's very kind of you. She said she'd take me to the next one if they ever do it again. Well, I don't think they're going to do the particular show again, because they're not a cute, adorable couple who are in love anymore. I mean, according to what I've heard.
I mean, right now they're in quarantine in New Zealand, so it's...
No, they're splitting up. They are not quarantined together.
Oh.
At least that's what I heard.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep, I heard that they are. I think Amanda Palmer posted a big thing on Patreon, being very like,
"Oh, possibly.
here's every detail of the situation," because she likes to share. That's her kind of style.
Yeah. And
to my understanding, Neil made a single tweet saying, "Respect my privacy during this difficult time," or something like that. So it's like, I don't want to talk about it. So anyway, that is what I've heard. So. Oh, Michelle said, you don't know much about AFP then. Her shows can be long with a bunch of O's. Accurate. I have never seen her perform live, except with Jason Webley. I've never seen an Amanda Palmer show. So I saw the two of them do the Evelyn show, and then she played with him at the 11 anniversary show. But I've never seen an Amanda Palmer show.
Right.
Apparently they're long. I believe it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hello, Erin. Late again. I'm sorry to say, I was just saying goodbye. You can go back to the beginning and listen to this. You missed Forbidden Brides and Diseasemaker's Croup. So that's what we read today. The plan is take the weekend off. On Monday, we will begin Monarch of the Glen, and then read that for as many days as it takes to get through it, which I suspect it'll be at least 3 days. So that's the plan. That's where we're at. Today is Bandcamp Friday. In case you guys didn't know that, it's one of the days where Bandcamp is not taking their cut of sales. I mentioned that yesterday. I also said that I was going to be releasing something. Unfortunately, a lot of things came together to make that just not really work out for today. So still working on the demos, but I did not have something that I felt good about releasing on this day. So, but I had a really good conversation with Strangely yesterday, where I was like, I don't even know if I have the energy to do this properly. Should I just not do it at all, but I don't want to just give up. And he suggested I set myself sort of a limit of like, this is the level of quality I want this thing to be at. I knew it was going to be something kind of rough, but like kind of have an idea in your head of like the level of quality you want to go for. And if you get to a point at which you realize that between now and when I need to, stop making noise because I have neighbors, I am not going to reach that point, just stop and set it aside. So you don't end up, bashing your head against it until 2 a.m. and feeling miserable, which I have done before. Unfortunately, home recording is not my strong suit. I really wish it was. This would be a great time for me to be able to record some stuff on my own, but it's just, it's not an area I excel in, unfortunately. So, unfortunately, I have nothing to release today, and I'm very sorry for that. I mostly felt bad because I told people I was going to do it, and I'm sure at least 1 or 2 people were maybe vaguely excited for it, maybe. I flatter myself. So if you were excited for it, I'm very sorry. I do have a recording that I ended up with last night that I went, you know what? This is about the most complete recording I'm going to be able to do tonight. And it is not salvageable without kind of completely starting over. So if you are very, very curious, let me know. And I might email you that recording if you promise not to share it with anyone else. I decided this is not even good enough to just post on Patreon as like, here's the thing, here's a view into my process. It just was bad. In fact, Aaron is usually my big cheerleader, and I sent it to him, and he said, yeah, maybe just try again later. So that's when I knew I wasn't being unreasonable. It was actually not great. So, however, there are 2 things that you can do today. One, if you have not yet bought my audiobook, you can go to my Bandcamp, which is linked down there, and you can buy the Wedding Band and Other Stories, which is an audio collection of 3 short stories that I wrote. And one of them is read by me. 2 of them are read by other friends of mine. They feature original music by cool musicians that I know, and they're pretty great. So if you are interested in buying that, today would be a great day to do it because I will get like 95% of the total instead of 75% or something. I've never really looked at the percentages. Bandcamp is a great service, and I do not begrudge them their cut. It is very reasonable for the service they provide. But if they're going to waive it on a day, I'm going to encourage people to buy things that day. So
go buy it.
If you have not bought it yet, or if you have bought it already, or you're just not interested, well, you're a jerk. But, well, no, you're great if you've already bought it. You're a jerk if you're not interested. I'm just kidding. There's another thing you can do, which is that my brother, who's going to post the link in the chat, released a new single today. And it is A, great, delightful original murder ballad. B, it features the amazing vocal and cello talents of our friend Unwoman. And C, it is a benefit for the Okra Project, which I understand, I might be misremembering the exact terms, but I believe it focuses, it's a bit of a narrow focus, but like sometimes it's good for charities to have a really specific thing, where they support, I think it's disabled trans people. And they get other trans cooks to go cook food for those people. It's something to do with food and trans people and supporting them and cooking, which is great. So I support all of those things. Trans people, eating, food, cooking. All of these things I support. So some percentage of the proceeds, Aaron, you might say what it is. I don't know. Is it 100%? Is it 50%? Something along those lines. Some amount of the money for Aaron's new single, which he has linked in the chat. It provides home-cooked meals for Black trans folk. Well, there you go. That's a much more succinct way of describing basically what I just said. So yeah, you can go buy that. I recommend it. It's a delightful song. If you like this crap, you'll probably like that too. So anyway, thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed the reading today. If you somehow just stumbled across this video, you can check out the playlist for the rest of the stuff I've read so far from Fragile Things, other Neil Gaiman works. I also have a playlist of me reading The Little Prince and also Jane Austen's Emma. So those are other things that you can listen to if you need things to listen to. On that note, I will take the rest of the weekend off and see you guys on Monday. Bye.